blending in, a product approach as well. So we can talk a lot more about a lot of the content that I'm presenting here in the Q&A. So I'm Karishma and I head growth at ChartMogul. So my background is basically that I previously led growth at ChargeBee for about 5 years. So I was an early employee of ChargeBee's team. And my role really evolved from starting out from marketing into kind of developing into a fully focused growth role. And how like growth really started at ChargeBee was that in the early days, we just had a marketing team, but as we scaled our customer segments and we started serving both SMB and enterprise customers, we needed kind of distinct teams that focused on these two areas. And that kind of led to the birth of this growth team. And I spent about 2 years building out growth at ChargeBee. And I've most recently joined ChartMogul now to scale both their growth and marketing teams. Prior to ChargeBee, I've co-founded a digital marketing consultancy with my husband, and there we primarily focused on user acquisition and marketing strategies. And I actually hold an academic background in behavioral science. I initially thought that I wanted to specialize in behavioral science and really scale my career there. So that's where my roots are really from. So today I'm building ChartMogul subscription data platform with a fully distributed team. So the team is completely remote, and it was that way even before COVID happened. So we operate in I think somewhere around like 14 different countries, and we're a 50-member team today. So just to give you some quick context on ChartMogul, because it just helps, because a lot of the content displayed here is also about like how ChartMogul deals with product-led growth. So we're basically a subscription data platform that integrates with billing partners like Stripe, ChargeBee, Braintree, and Recurly. So what we essentially do is like work as a layer on top of your billing system to essentially give you subscription analytics that are sliced and diced, and you can really go deep into how your subscription business is performing. We have over about 2K active customers, and the company started in 2015. It's raised a 3.7 million in seed funding from VCs like Point Nine Capital. And in the early days, ChartMogul really grew with a product-led growth strategy, and they later on scaled to like layer a strong sales team. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can work with a product-led strategy as well as have a sales team that work closely aligned together. So why are we talking about product-led growth today? I just want to set some context before going deep into specific strategies. So over the last decade, we've seen the emergence of almost a new kind of software company. We've like kind of seen the consumerization of B2B SaaS, right? And a lot of these companies whose logos I've displayed here are companies that have been incredibly successful in the software market. And while obviously one common thing tying these companies together is that they all provide cloud software, the other common aspect that they all have is their go to market strategy, and their go to market strategy has product led growth at its center. So just to build on that a little bit, so we're now today in like an end user era, and OpenView Venture Partners, I quote them a lot in this presentation, but they're a great resource that talks about this concept and talks about product led growth. And they position this as like, today we're in the end user era. So in this specific image, just to take you through this, like this is an example of how Slack thinks about user growth, right? So let's assume you have Jane and she works within a software company and she discovers Slack like through Twitter or Facebook or one of these mediums, right? She then checks out Slack and she says, oh, this looks interesting. My team really needs a way to collaborate with one another. And so she sends the URL to one of her team members and says, let's start chatting on Slack, right? And soon you have like Jane's team members, like say 2 to 3 of them, all collaborating on Slack. And then they start to, if Jane's in the marketing team, let's say she invites like her design team and product team and so on company and adopting everyone in the that's really on it, right? And that then if it provides a great product experience, ideally everyone says we love Slack. And that's pretty much what we've seen a company like Slack do. And I'll quote a couple of examples of other companies that have done this really well. But this is exactly what the go-to-market strategy that Slack had to really start growing as a much preferred collaboration software amongst most companies. So that shift right there, where it starts with Jane and then it moves on to the entire company, showcases that, today these decisions for software are made bottom up versus top down. And what that means is, like, previously we used to see leadership making decisions for software. So if it's a marketing team, you'd see like the CMO saying, okay, you need to use Marketo, right? Or you need to use like whichever software the CMO prefers. And the end users end up just adopting that software because it's what the leadership wants. And then as a result, you end up having like a group of frustrated end users that are really not very happy with the software, right? And that is what these companies have really changed today. These product-led growth companies have really changed today, where they've understood that these decisions for software are today being made by the end users who are actually using these products, and buyers have today changed, right? And so this means that, like, you have users like Jane and several people inside her team trying out a product like Slack and then saying, we want Slack, and recommending that to the CMO. And as a CMO, your role is probably then just to sign off on the budget and just trust your team that this is what they want to use, and this is the tool that we need to go ahead with. So in this shift, like, considering that we're now selling to the end users, and end users have like a really important role to play in the purchase process, we need to also understand that these end users buy software differently. So end users are often usually technical, in depending on the category that you're really selling to, but in many cases they're technical, or at least they understand how software products work. So they adept at using several SaaS products, even if they're not a developer. They've used a bunch of SaaS products before and they know what a good user experience is, right? End users also don't always want to engage in long sales cycles because they're educated and because they're empowered. They don't necessarily want to talk to like uh, 2 to 3 different salespeople to actually be able to purchase a product. They know what they want, right? And so they really demand those seamless product experiences. And end users often are moving away from clunky, frustrating legacy software. So even if you take the example of Marketo and HubSpot and a bunch of other marketing automation that's coming out, like Marketo did really well at one phase, but then HubSpot came in and really challenged Marketo on the UX side and also on the integration side, right? HubSpot suddenly came in with a platform play and said, hey, we integrate with pretty much every app marketers use. And because marketing tools have like really exploded over the last decade, integrations are really, really important, right? And so HubSpot almost like disrupted that space all over again, and now they are the preferred product, right? And we're going to see in like the next 10 years many more products coming up that will disrupt what HubSpot is doing and challenge what HubSpot is doing today. So it's kind of almost a cycle where, product innovation is what really helps these companies move forward and become the preferred software. And so end users really often want, so when we say end users, what do they want, right? Or like, how do you really cater successfully to these end users? Couple of different things that you can do, and these are like end user assertable, the least easily just sign in without a credit card and start testing your product, right? They also want to see published pricing on your webpage, because if you go back to the Jane model and you assume that Jane is the individual buyer and her CMO is the one who makes a decision on pricing, Jane needs to at a high level at least understand how much will this software cost, right? Is this something that I can take to my CMO and make a case for? And so publishing pricing is really important, at least for some of your basic plans. This is not always applicable for enterprise, very heavily enterprise companies, or even for your own enterprise plan. So you could, for instance, have an enterprise plan that is gated. End users also want a self-serve experience. So there's no point in having a free trial or a freemium version, but then if its usability and onboarding isn't such that end users can just sign in and quickly start using, it's just going to kind of backtrack and fall flat. And so end users often want a really strong self-serve experience where they don't need to speak to anyone, but they can just try, buy, and set up. And often they want a zero human purchase, right? So they often want like the ability to just quickly upgrade to a software. Like, for example, if you take a tool like Notion, I'm sure most of you have heard or used Notion. So if you take a software like that, like I think the base pricing is just like $5 per user or $10 per user. And so at that low price point, they really don't need to take the decision to a higher authority inside the organization to buy, right? They just want to be able to quickly put down their business credit card and just purchase it themselves. So having that, if you have like very low priced plans, having that ability to quickly purchase on their own, having that ability to allow end users to purchase on their own is important. So all of these strategies that I've just outlined involve removing barriers for users to try, experience, and find success with your product. And that's really what product-led growth is. So product-led growth is when your product becomes a driver for acquisition, expansion, and retention, and your product is at the center of your strategy. So this is one of the interesting analysis that OpenView actually did, where they've showcased a bunch of product-led growth companies and how the product-led growth ecosystem has really evolved over the last few years. So in 2012, you had one company that had a product-led PLG model, and in 2020, you now have 21 companies who've gone IPO that have a product-led growth model. So this graph, this chart, really showcases how it's very much possible to be a successful SaaS company with this model integrated in your strategy. So check out, so I'll showcase or I'll send over this slide, which has a bunch of links to all of these resources, but I would highly recommend checking out OpenView's PLG maturity grader, which is basically like just a simple quiz where you can self-assess where you are on the product-led growth scale. So apart from the fact that there have been a bunch of public SaaS companies, that have resulted from this new shift in like going to market, other reasons why SaaS companies are big fans of PLG is because number one is there's lower CAC. And so I'll outline this a lot more later in the talk, but a lot of the PLG strategies kind of involve acquiring customers at very low cost because primarily it's the product that's doing the acquisition. There's also automated revenue. We often call it like magic inside the company because it's almost like users sign up for the product, you support them at different levels through the product and maybe through customer success and support. But before you know it, like 6 to 8 months down the line, there's just automated revenue that comes in from this set of users, which you've really not invested as much time into. And the best part, I think, and I'll outline this later, is also the expansion revenue, right? It's not just the new sales that's generated from these users, but it's also how they expand.
Karishma, there are a few questions which people are asking as you speak. Do you want me to take it now or let's do it at the end of the session?
Sure. So I'm actually going to be pausing here and there on the slides for questions. Okay. So maybe when we do that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So another reason is that PLG really increases the likelihood of wide market adoption because the more users, it enables you to reach many more users, and so it increases your market share overall. Before we get deeper into some of the PLG strategies, I just want to call out some misconceptions that I believe, I've been reading about PLG and following the narrative a lot. And I feel that there are certain myths and misconceptions that are out there in the ecosystem that I just kind of want to debunk, at least for the purpose of this talk. So number one is, one misconception is that you don't need a sales team. So a PLG strategy does not mean that you don't need a sales team. What it means is that starting with this model means that you can add sales later or add a fewer sales team or a smaller sales team in the early days, right? So it's not a replacement for sales, but what it helps you do is sort of operate successfully without a sales team or investing very heavily in sales resources when you're an early stage startup, and building a culture of having a smaller sales team as you scale. It's also a misconception that you don't need marketing. So PLG strategies are often rooted in great marketing, and marketers work with PMs very, very closely today to support and enable PLG. And this will become very obvious as I speak about this a little bit later. And it's not true that PLG is the only recipe for building a successful software, right? So plenty of software companies have built successful businesses with a sales heavy approach. If you sell to buyers who are very slow to adopt software or whose market hasn't really matured yet, or if you sell an extremely complex product, a PLG heavy model may not be your only recommended driver of growth, but it can be something that you kind of layer on or supplement your sales-led model with. So again, it's like if you sell vertical SaaS, for example, let's say you sell a software for construction workers, right? If you're in that space, it's, the very high chance that a lot of users are not very used to using different software tools, and so your entire go-to market might be completely different, especially if you're selling in developing countries like India, to an audience that isn't very much used to using software. So I'll just pause at this point for some questions.
Hi Shreya. So we had two questions right now from our chat. So let's start with the latest question. So one
Sure.
is for an accounting and invoicing SaaS, that works in both enterprise and SME. Is it possible to have a product-led strategy for SME and freelancers and sales-led strategy for enterprise? Can we break this two for the segment that we are approaching?
Absolutely. So, in fact, that's very similar to ChargeBee's model, and ChargeBee was very successful, I'd say, with the product-led strategy. So, in the early days, we were catering to that freelancer kind of persona almost, and it was primarily product-led, right? But then after about a year or two of business, I think we added a sales-led model, and then it began that these two things worked side by side. So, it can definitely work. Like you can have a hybrid strategy that has a product-led approach, but also has a sales approach. I'll talk about this a lot more later in the presentation, and we can also discuss specifically during the Q&A. But it is very much possible, especially in the finance space, to do this. Any other
question? Yeah, one more question that we had. So, question from Prakhar Goyal. So for Slack's virality, it is basically the build in the product. The product was built in in a type that it automatically, touched everybody's work. And how to create a virality for a productivity app? How do we build a strategy for that?
So I'll be talking about that a lot actually in the next couple of slides. So maybe we can just take this question again if something is not clear.
Yes.
In the Q&A. Awesome. Maybe just one more question before I move on.
Yes. So one more from Prakhar Goyal is that they have a design software like Canva.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but a more generic example they would say is like a CRM solution. So what could be their kind of approach to the product-led strategy? If you want to put this question later on, you could,
Sure.
we can follow up with you later.
Sure thing. Yeah, I think we can address. I mean, hopefully you get some ideas, Prakal, from this next couple of slides. But if something's not clear here, we can address it in the Q&A for sure. Okay, so I'll just move on now, and I think we have less time, so maybe we can keep some more time for this in the Q&A.
Yes.
So, okay, so hopefully that gave everyone context on why PLG and PLG is really important in today's ecosystem. So the second half of this talk, I'll just focus specifically on growth strategies in a product-led world, hopefully addressing some of these questions that we had as well. So one thing that PLG strategies really focus on is building virality and referrals. Another one is driving product adoption and stickiness. And finally, I'll share some insights on how you can use product data and PLG to integrate low and high touch conversion strategies, which is hopefully going to address the question on what if I have both a product led and a sales model, right? It's really important to understand how to make these two things work together. So first up on the building virality and referral side, so I'm going to call out like two examples. One obviously everyone knows of, we're using the software now, Zoom, and the other one, Vidyard. So basically what Zoom, I think one big aspect that contributed to Zoom's success today is the concept of a viral loop, which I'll basically explain a little bit later in the later slides as well. But it's almost like a user acquisition loop where a user signs up, recommends the product to a friend or a colleague, and the colleague then signs up, right? In the case of Zoom, the user may sign up by seeing, whatever marketing, advertising, or any social media on the product, right? The user then shares the Zoom URL with his or her colleague, and then the colleague downloads the web app and uses and experiences the Zoom product, right? And that hopefully then takes them to that aha moment of like, hey, Zoom is an amazing product, right? And when the colleague reaches that aha moment, they're then going to say, I'm going to invite another colleague for my next meeting, right? And today we're seeing everyone, right, from our parents to students and teachers using Zoom in the same way to basically take care of their video needs. Vidyard is another tool which basically allows you to like shoot videos and share them asynchronously with your colleagues. And they have a very similar viral loop where a user signs up, they shoot a video using Vidyard's Chrome plugin, and then they may share that video with a friend, right? And usually when you share a video with someone, you're hoping for a response back on whatever you've shared. And so typically that person who's received that video will then shoot another video and send back the response using a Vidyard URL, right? And so then a viral loop really gets created where on sign up, there is a desire to share that product with a friend or with a colleague. The colleague then experiences the product and shares with another friend, right? And so that creates like a loop of user acquisition. And just imagine, like, this is free acquisition without really doing much marketing around your product, right? So this goes back to my point on like lower CAC. If you can build this kind of virality inside your product, the chances of you having a lower customer acquisition cost through channels and unnecessarily, like depending on channels like paid channels like AdWords and others, reduces. And so having this strategy can be really helpful in the user acquisition side. Another common example is Typeform. So their growth leader has spoken a lot about how the growth team in Typeform used PLG to build virality. So one common way they did this was through the powered by Typeform button that was present on any Typeform that was shared, right? So if I share a Typeform with a friend and the friend is not already a user of Typeform, they typically see that powered by Typeform button, and if they click on that, they can then build their own form, right? And so this ended up being a viral loop for them that caused a lot of people to discover Typeform, but then also experience the product. So again, viral loops involve experiencing the product. And taking an example of Calendly, a user sends a Calendly scheduling link. The recipient looks at the link and says, "Oh, check out this. I mean, this product looks really interesting, right?" And then they sign up and they start experiencing the product themselves. Now, the question is, would these strategies work if initially experiencing the product involved having to talk to salespeople? Probably not, right? The whole point of like this strategy working is that there's a free version of this product that anyone can pretty much sign up for to experience it. And so if there was a layered sales strategy in this process, the viral loop would not work, and this wouldn't be as successful. So this goes back to the freemium earlier on. So just want to kind of touch upon this topic. In some cases, your product might not like funnel there to talk pricing and show additional value. So let's say I'm like a buyer inside Slack, right? And I use Calendly as an individual person, and I invite like two other team members. At this point would be a great time for Slack's sales team to reach out to me and say, "Hey, I saw you have 3 people inside your company using Slack. Why not come on a company plan and talk about how this can benefit your entire organization?" So this is a great point to get your salesperson involved. So I think it's the PLG. Again, the PLG funnel doesn't say that you need to replace sales. It just says, it just like sort of suggests that you can use sales more effectively and use your salesperson's time to their best ability. In the second case, like users maybe experiences the product but doesn't really invite team members. So let's say I signed up for Slack and I just don't take any action. This is where your marketing team can really prompt them to take that next action using drip campaigns, ads, and a whole bunch of other things. So this is where marketing and sales can really blend in with product-led approaches to help drive the product-led approach and help it be more successful. So I spoke a lot about freemium earlier on, so just want to kind of touch upon this topic. In some cases, your product might not, like the two tools that I spoke about earlier are like productivity tools, right? But you might be building in the finance space or in any other space that doesn't really have like an inherent virality ability. And so in this case, freemium really helps you build referrals and build that word of mouth when you don't have that built-in virality. And so what freemium really is, or the way I see it, is as a referral and marketing engine. It is a revenue driver, but I think it's important to think of it as a marketing engine versus a revenue driver, because only then you'll be able to, I think, be successful with your entire distribution approach with freemium. And the best referral programs have a freemium model built in, right? Like I mentioned. So in the case of Dropbox, which is a huge success, you can share Dropbox with friends and you get additional free storage, right? So there is this concept of free storage and allowing users to quickly experience the value of the product without having to pay a penny. In the case of ChartMogul, and again, like we're in the subscription analytics space, so it's not, I mean, I wouldn't think of subscription analytics as like an inherently viral product, right? Not everyone is super vocal about like their data inside their company. But we have a freemium version that basically allows you to use ChartMogul free up until your first 10K in revenue on MRR. And what we found, like a lot of bootstrappers and early stage entrepreneurs doing is like sharing their ChartMogul charts and basically saying that, you know, this chart has been pulled from ChartMogul and this is shared in Twitter, right? And so we see like a bunch of users discovering our product because of people being vocal with their metrics. And there's a whole open startups movement, you know, that's basically going on where startups are being extremely vocal about their metrics. And so for us, like, you know, freemium and helping these entrepreneurs get started with ChartMogul really helps us build that network effect around the product. And one of the most exciting things for us, I think, is that Buffer has hosted their revenue dashboard on ChartMogul, and they've published it on their website. So they've basically published all their metrics openly for others to learn from, and that's powered by ChartMogul, right? So this is again an amazing network effect for us because they've linked to ChartMogul on that public dashboard, and now more people can find out about ChartMogul and the kind of metrics that we showcase. So I think while you might look at your product and think that, hey, you know, there's no inherent virality built in, there are ways that you can leverage freemium and smaller like product hacks to really try to drive like a network effect. And so I think overall, like a couple of things, just pointers on freemium is freemium can also drive enterprise user sign up. So I think there's also this kind of a misconception that freemium is primarily for early stage startups, and that is true. I mean, freemium is very successful with early stage startups, but you can very much drive enterprise user signups with freemium, and that goes back to the end user era that I was talking about, right? So I could be from a big organization, but you know, the fact that you offer a freemium product could prompt me to try and test out and then invite more users. And it enables a land and expand. So one of the things I learned at Chargebee in my time there was that the biggest success factor for freemium was obviously not just it was obviously the free to paid conversions that we were getting from like free customers directly converting into paid plans. But for me, the more interesting thing was those customers who converted from a free to paid version then becoming enterprise users over time, right? So we would see early stage startups who would like start with, you know, less than 1 million ARR starting on the free version of Chargebee. But then later in their life cycle, say 4 years down the line, they'd be a scale up customer on our enterprise plan, right? So that kind of beautiful expansion at a very, very low cost is what really gets me excited about freemium. And it's that land and expand strategy that really excites me. So I'm just going to skip this questions part because I don't think we have just 15 minutes left. So we can take any additional questions in the Q&A. So freemium and referrals and virality are a big like part of, you know, PLG. But I also want to spend some time talking about like product adoption and stickiness, because I saw that some of you in the form had wanted to learn about product qualified leads. So that's something I'm going to touch on now. So an important aspect of making PLG work is making sure users actually adopt your product, because again, the strategy will fall flat if like people just sign up for the product but then don't end up seeing that value. And so having like a solid self-serve strategy is really, really important to seeing success with product-led growth. So a couple of essentials, which I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but just want to call it out as well. So one is that your product needs to be super easy to use. Another one is that, you know, you need to have guided onboarding inside the product. This is especially true for slightly more complex products where, you know, the time to value may take a little bit longer. And so your product documentation and self-serve knowledge base together can really form a solid onboarding experience. Value discovery, I think, is the most important. So you need to really understand or like map out what is your aha moment, right? What is that point at which users realize like, yes, this software is what I really wanted. And once you map that out, basically try to figure out like what are the steps people need to take to get to that aha moment, and can they do that completely inside the product without talking to a salesperson again, because only then you have a truly self-serve discovery experience. Otherwise they're going to get frustrated somewhere along the way because they can't discover that aha moment on their own. So in the case of Slack, they do like a guided aha moment discovery. So the aha moment, I'd say in Slack is really when you send messages to your colleagues, right? And you have like multiple channels created and you're chatting with each other. But to get to that aha moment, you first need to invite your team members, right? So one of the first things Slack does is basically prompting you to invite team members when you sign up for the application, because they know you cannot get to that aha moment without inviting other team members. And so they kind of do like a guided handheld discovery without you having to speak to anyone to get there. In ChartMogul, what we basically do is for us, so like I said, we're a layer on top of like billing systems like Stripe and ChargeBee and Recurly and a bunch of others. And so for users to really get to our aha moment, which is like, you know, seeing your data inside ChartMogul and building charts with it, users first need to import their billing data from one of these systems. If they don't do that, they can't really see any data in ChartMogul, and it's not going to be exciting for them to use it, right? And so one of the first things we do is we send an intercom message on trial sign up. So as soon as you sign up for like a ChartMogul trial, you have Ingmar, our VP of customer success, sending users a message saying like, okay, the first step you need to take is import your billing data. Only then you can actually use the product and see the value, right? And so this kind of automated user discovery where you're really prompting users and helping them find that aha moment is really important, I think. And there are several automated ways you can do this without having to do a demo or having to like, you know, handhold the customer. So another aspect of really helping users find value in the product, or like helping your sales team also understand which users are worth spending more time on in terms of just qualification, because obviously when you have a freemium model, you know, you have a lot of users signing up and some of them may not be relevant for your team to talk to. Because they may not be the best fit for your product, right? And so helping your sales team and your marketing teams really focus on a specific type of sign up is really important. And product qualified leads is what can help, is a great aspect that can help you do that. So a PQL is essentially a user who's completed a key action inside of your product, which signifies their likelihood of becoming a paying customer, right? Again, in the case of Slack, this can be like sending 2,000 messages. So there's like a message minimum where you say, if somebody sent 2,000 messages, I qualify them as a product qualified lead, right? And this PQL can be a metric or it can be a combination of metrics, right? Depending on how complex you want it to be. So I was chatting with Sudeep from SignEasy about this just couple of weeks ago, and one of the things we spoke about is that like when you're an early stage startup, you don't necessarily know what your PQL metrics should be, right? And I think it's totally okay to start with a little bit of guesswork here. Like as the founder who's possibly led sales for a really long time, you know what a qualified user is, or your sales team probably knows what a qualified user is. So it's okay, I think, to just start with some guesswork to arrive at what a PQL could be, but then go back to looking at the data to really refine that model and kind of try to arrive at what the best PQL metric really is. So PQLs work great for self-serve freemium and sales-led free trials, and I'll talk a little bit about this here. So product qualified leads, I think, can be your salesperson's best friend. And the reason for that is that, you know, once a user completes a specific product action or becomes a PQL, you can alert your sales team, and so they can reach out to convert that user from a free plan into a paid version. So this can really help your sales team focus on the right kind of leads. I wouldn't say it's a replacement for SQL, but it's almost like a version of sales qualified leads for your sales team, right? And at ChartMogul, like our sales team loves PQLs, right? Like, so our sales leader is excited about PQLs because for her, it's like, you know, my team would rather focus on these customers who are engaged with the product. And so that kind of points back to the PLG culture that we have here as well. And the reason she's so excited, and one of the things that she told me about was that, like, PQLs have much better close rates because product value is already established. It's very likely that the PQL has come in through an inbound marketing channel. They've tried and tested the product, they've made like key configurations. And so for sales, the conversation is so much more valuable because when the user comes on a demo, they already know a bunch of things about ChartMogul. And all the sales team really has to do is help them with pricing, help them see a couple of additional features that they probably didn't know about, and really take them through, be a consultant. So I think the salesperson's role then just becomes a consultant and an enabler of really understanding the value of the product versus just giving a flat product demo, which the user can really just, you can even have an automated version of that. You don't really need a salesperson to deliver like a sort of top level demo, right? And so this way the entire experience can be a lot more customized to what each specific user needs. So again, like, how do you arrive at PQLs? I think like defining that success metrics and success metric. And like I said, this can be guesswork in the early days, but ideally, if you have a product like a tool like Mixpanel that you're using, then you can actually look at data, or you can just pull data from your product and run an analysis and try to see, what are those few actions that users take that leads to their success in conversion, right? Ideally, a data-led approach is the best way to do this. But if you don't have access to that data, some guesswork is okay, provided you add that data in later in the funnel. So I think one interesting way of thinking or tracking PQLs is basically like not just tracking the actual PQL, but also tracking a few actions users need to take in the product to become a PQL, right? That, like the Slack example, it could be inviting a team member. It could be just configuring a few basic settings. Like in the case of ChargeBee, for instance, you need to configure a couple of core billing settings before you can even start using the product. So that could be one of the things. It could be like send a message or send a video, right? So each of these actions can be tracked. So you can really understand what the drop off is and assign scores. Because, for example, if you take the 2000 message example, that's a lot, right? Like the company may not even be that large to send 2000 messages, or it might take time to get there. So you might want to build like PQL signals sooner, or you might want to have like different levels, like how engaged is someone at a basic level versus a highly engaged level. Because smart sales teams would want to engage with users who are even a little bit engaged, right? So even if it means that they log in like 10 times over 1 week, like salespeople would want to talk to them, because even if they've not done something more complex, they're just a lot more likely to be a more successful user than somebody who's never logged in even once. So finally, I want to also touch upon like integrations and distribution. So from a product side, I think this is becoming like a must-have in the SaaS ecosystem, because like I mentioned, when end users are using products, they want the product to be integrated with all of the different softwares that they use today. So Zoom does this really well, where they have like a Google Calendar integration, where every time you open up your Google Calendar, you remember that you can make it a Zoom meeting, right? And with Google Meet now being like, so accessible, like even inside ChartMogul, we don't always use Zoom. We also use Google Meet. But with this video conferencing like plugin, they really bring Zoom top of mind, and you're like, okay, I'd rather just use Zoom in this case. And so what that does is it improves stickiness in the product, which is really important for retention. Similarly, this is like a Vidyard competitor here, Loom, which has like a Chrome plugin, and Vidyard has this as well, where to shoot a Vidyard or Loom video, they want to remove the barriers as much as possible. So instead of you doing it in another video recording system, they provide a video recorder themselves, right? And for easy accessibility, they have this Chrome plugin. So anytime you're working or doing whatever, you can just quickly shoot a Vidyard or a Loom video. And so like integrating with like different tools and making your product really easy to access inside of the tools that people really use, I think is again very important to being successful with PLG as a distribution strategy. So these are some of the tools that you can use for PLG. This is a very basic list. There are a lot more out there, but like Intercom, for example, is what we use at ChartMogul to send in-app pop-ups, and even now we're looking at like piecing together like a PLG formula, or revamping the current one that we have with Intercom. You can also use app queues for like tool tips and like prompting users inside the product to take certain actions. Amplitude is great for product metrics to understand, like, so I had spoken about how you can like target users based on their usage, right? And so Amplitude is one of the better tools to be able to really understand usage. So I think we have like 5 minutes left. So I just want to quickly talk about like, okay, so how do you, now that we know how PLG works and, you know, some growth strategies that can help you augment it, how do you really build PLG into your company or have like a product-led growth model inside your company? I would say this really depends on the stage of your startup. So if you're at a scale-up level, ideally you have a VP of growth or a CGO, chief of growth, who basically has a team of designers, engineers, product managers, and marketers under them. For companies that are scaling up and targeting enterprise buyers, PLG requires a dedicated leader. And the reason I say this is because as you scale your SaaS company, it's very likely that you're going to be targeting mid-market and enterprise buyers. And so you will have a different team, right? In the sense, like, you're going to have a very diverse team. You're going to have sales leaders who are very experienced in selling to enterprise buyers, and you're going to have like marketing leaders who are also experienced in selling to enterprise buyers, right? You need all at a leadership level to really be able to drive some of these PLG initiatives forward and work with your sales and marketing leaders to make sure it's a successful initiative. And I think this becomes very important in a scale up where priorities are very different, and you really need like a champion internally to be able to drive this forward. If you're at a startup level, so I would say like, you know, anywhere between 1 to 5M like ARR, ideally like your CEO, marketing, and product leaders should collaborate cross-functionally to enable product-led growth. And I think it's extremely important for the CEO to be fully aligned. Like, if you believe in this model, it's very important to be very vocal about it with your team, so you build a culture of it, because a lot of talent in the market may not necessarily be used to like this PLG kind of system, because it's almost like it's I wouldn't say it's new, but it's consistently improving and innovating day to day, right? And so you need, like, as a CEO, you need to be a champion of the strategy from day one to really make sure that your team has it ingrained in the culture. So at ChartMogul, for example, like, our CEO insists that like we productize everything. So even if like there are specific components inside our application which are gated to talk to the sales team, because like say we're testing it out and we want to be sure about it before we release it to everyone, there's this constant culture of like productizing things eventually, right? And that's, I think, really important to kind of just drive PLG strategy and make sure that whoever you're hiring in your team to drive the strategy forward is successful. So I would say, like, you know, in this early stage startup, it should be strong collaboration between CEO, marketing, and product leaders to drive the strategy and, you know, execute it across the funnel. And then later in this stage of the company, you can actually hire in a VP of growth to scale this side of the business. So that's all from me today. Hopefully this was helpful. But I will now open up the forum for some questions and some discussion.